meter scale, and quadrant means you take any area and divide it into four quarters, right? That's a quadrant. So quad means 4. So you need a meter scale, and what is this? A string. And okay, can you read this for me, Fatima? You need, what do you need?
Meter scale, string, nails, hammer,
Hammer, measuring
measuring tape, noting pad, or paper.
and notepad. Yes, so simple. So what you want to do is you will go to the field, you will use your meter scale, you will measure 1 meter, you will take the string and you will put one string at one end, another string at another end. And using that string, you can make a quadrant, right?
Yes, sir.
While you are counting. So you basically select a good growing field, okay, or a grassland, and following the method, you have to make a 1 meter is to 1 meter ka area, because you have the scale and you have strings. And in that area will be your one quadrant. Okay. So in that quadrant, uh, you have to count how many plants of a particular species that you need to find the density of is present. So let's say in one quadrant, so you will use such 4 quadrants, which you are naming one A, B, C, D. Okay. And then you will count the number of plants which you are seeing in that quadrant. Okay. Do you understand? So you are, so let's say
Sir,
according to, yeah,
ABCD is
yeah.
the
Tell me.
name of the plant species, not the quadrant.
Oh, okay. Okay. So you're doing for 4 plants. You can go anyways. So let's start with one. Okay. Plant, let's say A. So these are the quadrants 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So
Yes,
for
sir.
A, in that quadrants, you find 6, 5, 4, and 2 individuals. So total became, is it what, 17 for species A. For species B, accordingly, you got 10. For species B, you got 9, and for species D, you got 15. Is that clear? When you are counting in that one by
Yes,
one
sir.
quadrant. Now, the number of quadrant that you took were 4, right? You studied in 4 quadrants.
Yeah.
Now, for each plant, you can find the population density by dividing the number of plant by 4 quadrants. 6, 5, 4, 2. So what is basically what we are finding mathematically is the mean, the average. So what is the plant that you will find? What is the number of plants for species A that you will find in 1 into 1 meter area or 1 meter square area? So that comes out to be 17 upon 4, that is 4.25. So population density can be in decimals, but we know that individuals can't be in decimals, right? There can never be 4.25,
Yeah.
right? So that's why density is not exactly how many plants are there. It's just a indirect way to assess. So if I say 4 instead of 4.25, then in one quadrant you found 6, and in one you found 2, and in one you find 5, which is all more than 4. So to get to a mean, taking mean is the most correct way here. So 4.25. Similarly, for plant species B, it comes to be 2.5. For species C, it comes to be 3. And for species D, it comes to be 3.75. Now you have a population density of all species. And you know, so if you just go and look at the field with your naked eye, you will not be able to know which plant is abundant or present, which plant has more density, which species has more density. But by doing this, and because you are sampling randomly, you are not showing any bias towards making the quadrants. So you have to be unbiased. You have to make quadrants for these 4 quadrants in 4 different places. Um, you should try to avoid bias. Sometimes some species try to grow in bunch. So if you see that one kind of species is growing in bunch, don't take that patch. Take a patch which you see is more or less not showing any bias. And why we do it 4 times? Because maybe one time when we did it, like in this case, let's see quadrant number 1. In quadrant number 1, species A, the number comes out to be 6, right? And species D comes out to be 1. But if you look at quadrant number 4, the same species D comes out to be 6 and A is 2. You understand?
Yeah.
So that's why we do it 4 times, so that if there is any bias, patch to patch bias, that will get tapered down, or that will get average. So errors gets average, so is minimized by taking the average. Deviation is minimized. You understand? So overall, when you do it 4 times, you realize that even if in one quadrant this is dominating, the other quadrant D is dominating. But overall, when we did it multiple times, you can take 8 quadrants also to make it more um, closer to the true picture. You will find that 4.25, that species A has more density than species D, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then we find the frequency index, which is the number of quadrants, which is the sampling units upon total number of quadrants studied, in which the species is present. So frequency index will be 1 for A, B, and D, because index simply means when you sampled 4 quadrants, how many quadrants had species A present. You try to be as unbiased as you can, but still there are chances like this. See here, you will see that species C was not present in the third quadrant at all, correct?
Yeah.
So for species A, B, and D, they're present in all 4 out of 4 sampled. So 4 upon 4 is 1. So frequency index for A is 1, B is 1, D is 1. But for C, it will be 3 out of 4, which is 0.75. Is that clear?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Yes. And population density, as you know, total individuals upon total number of plants of that species upon total number of quadrants
Okay.
in which the plant uh, 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 in which you found the in which the plant is present. So in case of C, remember that it was not present in one quadrant. So when we will figure out its density, we cannot take this quadrant. Why? Because in this quadrant it's not present, so it cannot incorporate to its density. The density here is 0. Okay, so if you realize, to find population density for A, it is 17 upon 4. For B, it is 10 upon 4. But for C, it is 9 upon 3, not 4. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So by frequency index, you will know that the index is low for C. But clearly, if I divide it by 4, then the population density will be very, very low. Correct?
So
Because
I understood what is population density, but then what is frequency index?
frequency index simply says that how frequent that species is. If I sample 4 places, will I get it in all the 4 places?
Okay.
Or are there chances that I will not get it in 4 places? We are not talking here about number at all. When I talk about, even if there is one individual present, it will count in its frequency. So the question is, I am asking that if I go to locality A, will I find a red car? So even if I find one red car in that locality, I will count that yes, the frequency of finding a red car in that locality is there. So in some localities, I can find 10, but in both the localities, it is present. So frequency index tells you about in how many sampling sites or quadrants that plant occurs. We don't care about the number, but in density, we care about the number and also in how many quadrants it occurs. Is that,
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
does it make sense?
Yes, sir.
Is it clear to everyone else?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So good evening, Kulsum and Matthew. How are you? Kulsum, Matthew, how are you doing?
Fine, sir.
Okay. Do you have any doubt to begin with?
Not really, sir. No.
No? Okay. Kulsum?
No, sir, no doubt.
No doubts. Okay. Great. So in today's class, as we discussed in the last class yesterday, we will be dedicating the class to genetics and the questions, right? So in the last class we did, what did we do in the last class? Oh no, we have to finish chapter 14. Sorry, I got confused with batch here. Okay, so let me quickly share the book. We have to finish this chapter today. Yeah, can you all see the
Yes, so we can see the screen.
Great. Perfect. Okay, so can anyone quickly summarize what we discussed in the last class with respect to decomposition? So we talked about decomposition, right? Quickly. Anyone would like to just summarize? Matthew, how about you?
Sure, sir. I will do it. Right. So we discussed. We started off with decomposition. We started actually off with the food web, and then we moved on to decomposition because we completed with that. We discussed like NPP, GPP, and all.
Yeah,
So first of all,
decomposition is in the
yeah.
productivity, not in decomposition.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh
Sorry,
yeah.
sir. So yeah, we discussed that. We moved on into we talked about what productivity is, gross primary productivity and net primary productivity, for which gross primary productivity is the rate of production of organic matter during photosynthesis, and the net primary productivity is the gross primary productivity without minus the respiration losses, which constitutes the net primary productivity. And then there was, and yeah, then we moved on to decomposers. We also learned that formula, which is GBP minus R equals NPP, which is derived from the definition of the net primary productivity. And then we moved on to decomposition, in which we saw about decomposers. So the main function of decomposers is to break down complex organic matter into inorganic substances like carbon dioxide, water, etc., through a process called decomposition. So the main part of decomposition is to break down the detritus, which constitutes of dead plant remains, dead remains of animals, including fecal matter, etc., which is the raw materials for decomposition. So there are 5 steps, which is fragmentation, leaching, catabolism, humidification, and mineralization in decomposition. So we start off with fragmentation, where the detritus is divided or like broken down into solid, like physically small, like organic matter into which is called fragmentation. And by the process of leaching, water soluble inorganic nutrients are precipitated as unavailable salts, which is done by yeah which is done by the process of leaching. And then comes catabolism, in which bacterial and fungal enzymes which degrade the detritus into simpler organic substances, which is called catabolism. The difference between catabolism and fragmentation is that in fragmentation you divide it into smaller physical particles, whereas in catabolism you divide it into more like inorganic substances. So it's more in the chemical perspective. And
Yeah, it's
then
an enzymatic reaction.
enzymatic reaction, yeah. So then happens humidification, in which humus is formed, which humus, which is
One
a
thing is
dark.
that one thing is that they do not happen one after the other. They're all independent processes and can happen in parallel. Okay. So do
Yes,
not remember it as
yes.
that it happened one after the other, like first
Oh,
fragmentation happened, then leaching, then catabolism.
well, I thought it
I
was a
also
step-by-step process, so that's why
No, it is not. So that is what I also
it's not.
emphasized on in the last class, right?
Yeah,
Because
sir.
it is
I now
important to
remember.
note that
Yeah,
if you pay attention to this line, it says it is important to note that all the above steps in decomposition operate simultaneously on the device.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Clear. Yes. So then the next part of the decomposition is humification, in which humus is found, which is a dark colored organic substance. And then after that, mineralization occurs, in which the minerals which are generated after decomposition are returned back to the soil. and yeah, therefore the process of decomposition is complete, you say. So
So
in which,
humification also has this one angle of humus. And one question that came in your board examination was that why humus? How humus makes the soil more fertile, or what is the role of humus in a soil? So how will you answer that based on
humus contains a lot of minerals, and it is also resistant to microbial action, and because of that, it is very valuable to the soil as it increases its fertility and its nutrient value.
it is very valuable,
uh,
but you are not telling
yeah
where does the value lies. So in the last class, I told you because of this very slow rate of decomposition, it constantly keeps giving the soil nutrients very slowly and never
yes,
allows
I
the
said nutrient value. It's valuable it's, yeah, I said nutrient value.
yeah, but nutrient value is also present in other dead and decomposing matter. But the point is they decompose very fast and all the nutrient goes down in the soil. And then after that, if there is no nutrient, then there is no nutrient. But adding humus will ensure it's like a fixed deposit that very slowly it will keep giving you benefit. Okay, over a long term.
Okay, so
Yeah.
understood.
So that's the benefit of adding humus to the soil. That's why farmers also add humus to the soil. Yeah, and that process by which nutrients and minerals are added to the soil from the humus is called mineralization. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Continue.
Yeah, so then we discussed about the factors of decomposition and how it's also an oxygen requiring process. It depends on temperature, soil, and soil moisture, which is like the most important climatic factors which regulate decomposition. And we discussed that warm and moist environments favor decomposition, and low temperature anaerobics inhibit decomposition, resulting in buildup of organic materials because decomposition is a largely oxygen requiring process.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah.
And then
Then
in the
we
last
talked.
slide, yeah, yeah,
Then we talked about energy flow and photosynthetically active radiation, which is the main source of energy of a food web or of a plant, in which they only capture like 2 to 10% of the photosynthetically active radiation, and this small amount of energy actually sustains the entire world because plants are the primary producers.
I think yesterday I asked you to go back and revise a little bit about the laws of thermodynamics. Did you go back and do that? Could you find time? If not, it's fine. Like, but you should go and revise. Okay. So in the last class, I told you that there are two kind of food chains, basically two kind of food chains in nature. One is the grazing food chain, which is the simple food chain, which is depicted as a one-way chain starting from producers, going to primary consumer and then secondary consumer. And if you want to put a tertiary consumer or an apex predator, you can do that. But basically, we do not include detritivores in the grazing food chain. Whereas the detritus food chain, so grazing food chain starts with producers, whereas the detritus food chain, it begins with a dead organic matter. Now, a dead organic matter can happen at any point in this chain. Producers can also die, primary consumers also die, secondary consumers also die, and all the dead and decaying matter is treated as same. Their rate of decomposition may vary, like we discussed last time, depending on what kind of nutrition is logged in it. If it has lignin or chitin or something very difficult to break down, then it will take more time. If it has something sugar based or carbohydrate or nitrogenous waste, then it decomposes more quickly. But ultimately, these decomposers, which are heterotrophic organisms, they decompose the organic matter and it comes back to the nature. Okay. After breaking down, It is absorbed by, so they are also called saprotrophs. So saprophytic, remember we were discussing about organisms and so I told you that fungi is saprophytic. Okay. Autotrophs, heterotrophs. Saprotrophs is one kind of heterotrophs which depends on decomposed, dead and decaying. The word sap comes from anything which has decomposed after dying. It converts into a sap-like thing. So saprotrophs eat these decomposed or dying substances. So what they do, they secrete digestive enzymes out of their body. For example, fungi. Fungi secrete their digestive enzymes on the, so they first grow on the substrate and then slowly secrete digestive enzymes. So this the organism on which they are growing starts decomposing, and while it is decomposing, they can absorb the unlocked nutrients through their hyphae. Okay. If you see a fungi, it was here. So you know that a fungi has a hyphae and this part, right? It can directly absorb from here. Is that clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool. So this so what happens then is that where is GFC important and where is this DFC important? This was one question. If uh, in terrestrial ecosystems on land, DFC makes more sense. Okay, where fungi can grow. But in aquatic ecosystems like um, um, pond, lakes, GFC is a major way to energy flow. Okay, in terrestrial, it is detritus food chain. Is it clear? Because all these detritivores, most of them are either these fungi, most of these saprophytes are either fungi, earthworms, these bacteria, which are not present in an aquatic system. Okay, is that clear, everyone?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And when we see this one chain starting from producers to consumers or from detritivores to producers to consumers, basically we call it a food chain or a trophic level chain. So food chain, as it goes up from so these levels in the food chain are called trophic levels, and multiple chains in nature interact. So if you see in a nature, there is no exclusive chain that is not connected. So if you take any grass, that grass will be eaten by multiple kind of herbivores. Those multiple kind of herbivores will be eaten by different kinds of carnivores. Okay. So if you see, instead of just a single chain, there will be a branching pattern. So these interconnection of food chains make a food web, like a branching web. Okay. And as organisms go high in that chain, they also go high in the trophic level. So the first trophic level belongs to producers. Okay. Then which are like then comes which are plants, and then herbivores, which are the primary consumers, uh, has the second trophic level, and carnivores, which are secondary consumers, come to the third trophic level. And as I told you, sometimes we also go to tertiary consumers. So if you look at this table here, producers are plants, which also includes phytoplanktons. Phytoplanktons are very, very small unicellular organisms which are capable of doing photosynthesis present in the aquatic ecosystem. So phytoplanktons and zooplanktons are present in aquatic ecosystem. And these are the major food for very, very big fish. Okay, they majorly depend on these zooplanktons and phytoplanktons. Apart from phytoplanktons, also comes your grass and trees in the producer level. Then second level is herbivore, where comes the zooplankton. The word zoo means they behave more like animals. Zoo means animals. Zoology means study of animals. Okay. Then grasshopper, which is an insect, and cow, which is again, so insects also can be herbivores. In fact, more insects are herbivores than our cattle. So most of our crops are destroyed by insects, right? They eat plants, caterpillars, beetles, ants, grasshoppers. They all are herbivory insects. Then at the second level, which is the third level, which is the secondary consumers, is your bird, fish, sometimes wolf also. Okay, so they basically can eat. So fish can eat a zooplankton, birds can eat grasshopper, etc. Wolf can eat cows. Okay, and sometimes there is an apex predator like man or lion, which can feed on birds and fish. We don't feed on wolves, but a lion may or may not, depending on situations. So we include one more fourth trophic level, which is a top carnivore. Is that clear? There's no
Yes.
hard and fast rule. We look at the dynamics, we see who's able to kill whom, and then we go and place them in different trophic levels. But the idea is that what the first level eats, the second level should eat the first level, the third should be able to eat the second, and the fourth should be able to eat the third. That's the idea. And that is only what is important. Okay. Now, why it is important that they should be connected is because we have to now study the flow of energy. Now we know that energy in biological system is heat energy. So every organism, every cell produces heat, correct? Yes or no? So if you look here, when from sun, remember what was PAR? How much was PAR? Quickly, a quick revision. For the plants, first trophic levels are plants. So from sun, when they're getting the direct sunlight, how much is PAR of the total sunlight?
2 to 10%.
No, 50% is PAR. Okay, around 50% is PAR. Remember that? What
Oh
is 2
yes,
to 10?
yeah.
Yeah, what is 2 to
Well, plants
10%?
only consume 2 to 10%.
From that PAR, plants take 2 to 10%
Yeah.
to do photosynthesis. So if I ask how much fraction does plants take of the total sunlight for photosynthesis? Okay, write down these lines. So PAR is around 50% of the total incident sunlight. PAR is photosynthetically active radiation. It is around 50% of the total incident light, which means all of the sunlight is not important for photosynthesis. Out of that 50%, which can actually activate the plant to do photosynthesis, plants only take 2 to 10%. So you can write out of the PAR, plants absorb 2 to 10% to do photosynthesis.
Yes.
Okay. So how much it become, what fraction it is taking from the total sunlight? If it is taking 2 to 10% from the 50%,
1%.
1 to 5% from the total sunlight, right?
Yes.
You can write down plants only take 1 to 5% from the total sunlight, total incident sunlight for photosynthesis. So where does most of the sun's energy go in nature? These are some concept building classes you have to think. If plants only take that much, where does the rest of the energy from the sun goes? A lot of energy comes to the earth. Where does it go?
Heat energy.
Yeah, it's scattered and it's lost as heat energy in the atmosphere and the ground. So earth gets heated up through sun on an average. Okay. So just to the energy that sun uh, radiates in 1 hour, every hour, the amount of energy that total sun radiates out towards Earth, if we are able to capture that total energy radiated by sun in 1 hour, the whole world can use that energy for around a year, okay, to do everything that we do, to run the whole world. It's that much. So a lot of energy has to just bounce back into the space. And in that, a major role is played by the reflecting surface of our Earth, which is the North Pole and the South Pole. So these glaciers or these ice sheets are white, and white things reflect very efficiently. So now people, when they are creating mathematical models and trying to understand Earth's global warming, it is a feedback loop. The problem is with greenhouse effect, which is happening, greenhouse effect, the greenhouse gases, that is something related to the last chapter, but we are just discussing here to build some concepts, right? So what is a greenhouse gas?
Carbon dioxide.
But what is a greenhouse? What does the word greenhouse effect means? Anyone knows the concept of a greenhouse? So in very cold countries, if you have to grow crops like tomatoes, you can't grow it
They
because
grow in like closed, controlled environments.
yes, they grow in closed chambers. What are they made up of? Those closed houses are called greenhouses. They are made up of glass. Okay, so sunlight can come in, but most of it cannot leave as heat. So heat gets trapped in that house. So inside the greenhouse, the temperature can be as higher from outside as 10 to 15, even sometimes 20 degrees. So even in a very cold environment where there is only 10 degrees outside, but the crop needs 25 degrees or 30 degrees, you can grow it in a greenhouse. So that is called greenhouse effect. You allow heat and light to come in, but you do not allow the heat to pass out. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
The similar thing some gases do in our atmosphere. So these gases are called greenhouse gases. One which was very correctly, I think, pointed out by Fatima, carbon dioxide. So the major greenhouse gas includes methane, carbon dioxide, and your CFC, chlorofluorocarbons. So these gases are present in the atmosphere and they are like a blanket. They are like a greenhouse. So heat and light can come. They get incident on the Earth's surface, but when they get reflected from there, they have to go out in the space so that Earth does not heat up beyond a point. But if the concentration of these gases increase in the atmosphere, which is like throughout over around the Earth, they absorb that heat which was escaping and do not allow the heat to escape. So they hold the heat. So what happens? Earth starts heating up more than it should. And how much more? You know, even if that change is just 1 degree Celsius, mean change, it is catastrophic. It shows effect. Okay, because you may not appreciate, but even a very slight change in the average temperature of Earth may lead to glaciers melting. Okay, deserts getting even drier and hotter. So overall, the Earth moves towards a warming period. That's called global warming. Okay. And as these ice sheet melts, now you are losing the area which was actually reflecting back the light effectively, which was like a mirror of Earth. So when you lose this area, now you are not able to reflect back a lot of light. So even a lot of heat and light gets absorbed by the surface and the water itself because there is no ice at the caps, north cap and the south cap. So because of heating, you're losing ice. Because you're losing ice, you are trapping more heat. And then more melting of the ice, then trapping more heat. Do you understand?
Yes.
So it's a domino effect. It is like a feedback loop. On the top of it, if we keep adding CO2 into the atmosphere by using fuels, burning fuels, which are fossil fuels, or by industries and things. So we are not relying on renewable energy and we are using the traditional methods, coal and all. So we'll be adding more and more CO2 into the atmosphere that will again trap more heat. So humans basically have not started this process of global warming. That is one myth that people have, that humans started global warming. It is a periodic rhythmic cycle of Earth. It is not that the Earth is warming up for the first time. It has happened multiple times in the past. So ice age comes where a major fraction of Earth freezes, then that ice melts and warming phase comes. Then a major fraction warms up, but that warming up does not go beyond a point. Okay, so if you look at the North Pole's ice cap, 60 years, 70 years ago, if we have the data that these caps were more. Okay, now when summers come, the caps become very, very less, the ice caps. It also leads to penguins and seals and walrus and polar bears losing their habitat because they depend on these ice. It also leads in increasing the average heat trapped in the earth. Okay, so this is a cycle. This will happen. What humans are doing is it's equivalent to putting a petrol in fire. We are accelerating the process. We are making the process faster, which will not give time to the ecosystem, to the species of plants and animals to adapt, and they will go extinct. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
That's what we are. So that's greenhouse, right? So I was just discussing greenhouse because this heat should be lost. They should go back, radiated back in the space, but it does not. It gets trapped. But let's come back to here. So the energy that goes in the plant, again, when it goes from plant to the next trophic level, again, some heat is released out, some loss is there. So at every level, you will see that there is loss due to heat, correct? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah, good. So now, having understand these things, the most important concept for this chapter is ecological pyramids. Now, what are ecological pyramids? This is a way to represent the dynamics of the ecosystem. So we can make pyramids which are of so the studies, there are three types of ecological pyramids that we study. Ecological pyramid of number, okay, biomass and energy. Is it clear? So pyramid of number, pyramid of biomass and pyramid of energy, these three are more important. You will see, let's talk about, so going from trophic level, P means producer, PC means primary consumer, secondary consumer and tertiary consumer. If you look at this pyramid, focus here. Can anyone explain me this pyramid? What do you understand by this? Because you have already discussed it with JD sir. I would like someone to initiate. Kulsum? Are you there, Kulsum? And I think Kulsum is not able to speak or something. So Fatima, would you like to explain this?
What do I have to do?
Tell me what does this first pyramid, 14.4a, pyramid of numbers tells you about? How will you interpret that pyramid?
The producer is maximum, then the primary consumer reduces, the secondary consumer reduces more, and the tertiary consumer reduces more.
Yeah, that produces, but do you see something very, very stark here? Can you comment something on the nature of the reduction?
It's too much.
It's multifold, right?
Yeah, that too.
Exactly. So if you see producers, so if this is a ecosystem which is set up, can I say that to sustain just three tertiary consumers, let's say three tigers in an ecosystem, it takes more than 3,54,000 secondary consumers, right? On which these tertiary
Yeah.
consumers depend. And then, so it is like multifold. And then you see again, almost a double change where there are more than 7 lakh primary consumers present to sustain these 3.5 lakhs secondary consumers. And when you come to producers, it is again from 7 lakh, it's 58 lakh, around 8 times more, correct?
Yes, sir.
So the steep of decrease or increase as you go up or down respectively is too much. So it simply means that in terms of number, these numbers are very important for us to appreciate that when we change, for example, if you go and talk to someone that we are cutting forests, they're like, "Arey, there are so many forests, so much of area is still forest area." Then if you go and tell them that no, this is not enough for lion species to continue, it's like, why it is not enough? This forest is as big as this city. But that's not the point. The point is, this is how lions live. This is how their behavior is in ecosystem. Lions have their territories marks, which can go to kilometers. And two lions cannot share a territory. Will have territorial fights, and they will either injure each other fatally or will kill each other. So that's where also you will lose the apex predator number. And just for 3 lions, you need this much of primary consumer deers and other wolves and all. And to keep 7 lakh deers, you need to have a very big area, correct? So don't just look at the area because you want to conserve lions. You also have to look at the relationship lion has with the primary consumers and then decide the area for conservation of lions. Do you understand why these numbers are important? Because a normal person who has no idea of ecosystem ecological research or to appreciate trophic levels will not understand it. For example, almost all politicians who have not studied evolution or ecosystem. So when they make policies to conserve nature, the policies are very flawed, and you can understand why, because they don't take into account these numbers and do not understand the consequence that if so to a normal person it would be like, okay, you have to just conserve 3 lions, right? So okay, let me have 200 300 deers. That's not enough, right? Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and you also appreciate that the pyramid of number is a upright pyramid. Upright means as you go up the trophic level, the area decreases. Okay. Or the number decreases. Sorry, here the number decreases. So it's a upright pyramid. A similar kind of pyramid you will see also in terms of weight. Okay. So producers are highest in number, but they also have low weight. So if you talk about weight at the producer level, so if you have to sustain around 1.5 kg of dry weight at the tertiary consumer level, you need around 800 kgs per meter square of dry weight at the producer level. And this dry weight means that the organism we are taking out water out, because different plants or different organisms can um, um, store different amounts of water. So to make studies more scientific, we always take dry weight. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So again, you see just like the pyramids of numbers, the weight pyramid on a trophic level is again upright, and it takes lots of weight at the producer level to sustain a very less weight at the tertiary consumer level. Okay. Now, why is it happening? Can you tell me why is it happening? What do you think is the reason
Because
for
the
this happening?
energy keeps on reducing as the
Perfect answer. Yes, continue. Elaborate, Fatima. Perfect answer. Continue,
as the
continue.
pyramid goes from producer to primary consumer to secondary consumer to tertiary consumer.
So as the energy goes up the pyramid of the ecosystem, it becomes less and less. Okay, so there is less and less energy that goes up. The most energy is logged at the producer's level in the ecosystem. Then when it goes to herbivores, it is lesser than what producers had. per unit biomass or per unit area. Okay, productivity we are talking about. And then as it goes to the carnivores, again there is loss, not just respiratory loss, but other kind of losses as well. Then to tertiary level also there are loss in terms of heat as well now is added. Okay, so there is loss of energy, so less and less energy goes up. That's why and energy is required to sustain every cell. So that's why as you go up the pyramid, more numbers and a higher biomass is required to sustain a lower number and a lower biomass of tertiary consumers. Is that clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now the question is, there are three. So NCRT only shows two pyramid, but the third pyramid of energy, how would that look like? Which has been not shown here, but how do you think the pyramid of energy will look like if we draw one?
It will be from high energy to low energy.
High energy will be at the top or at the bottom?
At the top.
At the top. So you mean
What?
the broad? Yes, Matthew.
No,
The
no, no,
question
no,
is,
no. At the bottom, at the bottom.
yeah, the question is, if I draw a pyramid for energy, because this pyramid is for number and this is for mass. There's no pyramid for energy. So if I draw a pyramid for energy in an ecosystem, taking these same components, prime producer, PC, SC, and TC, then how will that pyramid look like? That will look like exactly similar to the pyramid of number and mass, because high energy will be required to sustain very low. So high energy will be present in the producers, whereas very low energy will pass on to the tertiary consumers. Correct?
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
at every level there is loss of energy through respiratory losses and heat. Correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. So all pyramids, mass, number, and energy will be upright pyramids. Now the question will not come on this majorly because you understood it. The question will come, do you think there can ever be a pyramid that is not upright but is inverted? Is that possible in nature, or do you think it's not possible in nature?
Sir, if the resources are not unlimited, then there can be.
Resources are never unlimited. Even in these cases, the resources are limited. But you don't have to worry about resources because we have already defined the trophic levels. So howsoever the resources are, we will only take into account what the producers have in terms of energy, mass, or number. We are not taking here in account how much nitrogen is present in the earth, or how much iron, or how much carbon is present. Correct? Whatever is there with the producer, we are taking that into account. The number of plants will be fixed on planet Earth, right? There can never be unlimited plants on planet Earth, which we think and we keep cutting. Agree or not?
Yes, sir.
So do you think under any condition, the pyramid of either energy or mass or number or all of these can be inverted, or simply it's not possible? By inverted means, what I mean is that a less number of producers can sustain a more number of primary consumers. So that will look like an inverted, where this producer bar will be smaller. So you swap the blue bar with the green bar. So is that scenario possible in nature according to you?
No.
No? Matthew, also, what are your viewpoints on this?
I mean, it is possible, but I don't know how it is possible.
I don't think it's possible.
Yeah, so it looks, if you think, it looks very uh, uncertain that that could happen, but in fact it happens, and that only happens in a aquatic ecosystem. Okay, so when scientists started, ecologists started studying the aquatic ecosystem, they realized that this is a pyramid just for two levels, producers and primary consumers. So producer here is your phytoplankton and primary consumer here is your zooplankton. So zooplanktons feed on phytoplankton. Okay. And then if you go to fish, that will be the secondary consumer. So you can add that also and the pyramid will stay the same. There will be a bigger area for fish, which is the secondary consumer. So we see that a small number, a small biomass, not number necessarily, but biomass of phytoplanktons can sustain a higher biomass of zooplankton. Now, can someone tell me how is that happening? Yes, Kulsum. So this one, which we are discussing now, is in an aquatic ecosystem or in a lake ecosystem or a pond ecosystem or a river ecosystem. Okay, Kulsum?
Is it because the energy transferred is more?
Perfect answer. Again, good, Fatima. Yes, and Kulsum is asking a question, and the previous one, bog ecosystem. The previous one is just simply called terrestrial ecosystem pyramids, where there's a one-way flow from higher numbers to lower numbers, higher biomass to lower biomass, higher energy to lower energy. Okay,
So
is that
I
clear?
said the answer, but how is that possible?
Cool. Okay, let's discuss that. That's also so honest of you. So how it happens is,
But I said it on my own. I did not look anywhere.
yeah, that's very obvious. So the answer is, how can a small biomass sustain a big biomass of primary consumers? Okay, and if we go one step up, then you will see a small biomass of zooplanktons can also sustain a higher, even much higher biomass of secondary consumers. That is also true. They have just shown it for two levels, but it can also go to the third level. Now, this is possible because this small biomass contains lots of energy, much more than this large biomass. So in these phytoplanktons, energy is very compactly stored and they are very, very energetic, or they have lots and lots of nutrients and energy unlocked in it, locked in it. So even one primary consumer feeds on just one phytoplankton, it will get a lot of energy. Okay. So more energy is present at producer level than at primary consumer level. So that's where this pyramid can afford to be inverted. But here also, if you draw a pyramid for energy for the same ecosystem, for this aquatic ecosystem or a lake ecosystem, will the pyramid be inverted or upright?
Inverted.
Upright. An energy pyramid can never be inverted. It is never possible. It is against the
But
law of, yeah,
the producer has the most energy, and then the primary consumer has lesser energy than the producer.
exactly. That's what I'm saying. So if you draw it, draw it. If you draw a
Okay.
energy
Yeah.
pyramid,
Okay.
everyone understood? Or is there any confusion? So if I draw an energy pyramid, the column for energy at the producer level will be bigger. Okay. And the column for energy at the, sorry, will be small. Do you understand?
Yes. Sir.
So these producers, which are less in biomass, have more energy stored in it. And when primary consumers feed on these producers, some energy gets lost as heat. So the rule of nature, the rule of thermodynamics will always follow. And even if at the second level, the biomass is more, but that total biomass will contain less energy. So when you will go one step forward, again you will see that at the tertiary level also the pyramid will have even less energy. Make sense? But in this case,
Yes. Sir.
the biomass that is sustained will be more. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
So this is for secondary. Everyone understands here? So this is the
Yes,
only
sir.
case where the pyramid can be inverted in a aquatic or a lake ecosystem where small biomass of phytoplankton can sustain higher biomass of zooplankton, and they can sustain even higher biomass of fish. But energy pyramid will still be upright, just like these two. So write down, in nature, the energy pyramid can never be inverted. It doesn't make any sense. Less energy cannot go. So I can never eat, you know, um, 10 kilojoule, and when it goes in my body, it is 20 kilojoule, right? The only possibility is when I eat 10 kilojoules, in my body, it will go and only 8 kilojoules or 7 kilojoules will be absorbed. The rest will go as a waste, right? Which I'm not able to absorb. Or I lost it in as a heat energy, or unable to digest those parts. So when we eat food, all the food we are not able to absorb, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the fecal matter that a human discharges out, it's not like it has no energy or no organic matter. It is basically a detritus. The same fecal matter can be degraded by bacteria and other organisms, and they can get energy out of it. So we are losing on energy at every level. So for energy, it will always be upright. Please mark it down, and this is an important concept. Everyone understood? Any doubt?
No, sir.
No,
Cool, great. So this is an ideal pyramid of energy, which is at the end. Okay. And if you see from the sunlight, which is, let's say, around 10 lakh joules, only 10,000 goes to the primary. So which is, if you calculate it, it is 1%. From sunlight to producers goes around 1%. This is what we also discussed before coming to this pyramid, right? Of the total sunlight, primary producers of plants only take 1 to 5%, right? Yes or no? Can you see that 1% rule following here from sunlight to producers?
Yeah.
Yeah, simple. And from producers onwards, then it is a 10% rule. So in the ecosystem, when energy enters the ecosystem, it follows 10% rule. So the write down the question, what is 10% rule of energy flow in an ecosystem? Or describe the 10% rule of energy flow in an ecosystem. Write down, from producers to primary consumers, 10% of energy is passed on, and it continues to follow the trend from primary consumer to secondary consumer and secondary to tertiary. So if you look at these joules, 10,000 to 1,000, 1,000 to 100, 100 to 10. That's why a organism which is at the tertiary consumer level, like a lion, has to eat more secondary consumers or more primary consumers to get the same amount of energy that they got by eating plants. Okay. So that's why the number pyramid makes sense. Just to sustain 3 tigers, you need thousands and lakhs of deers. Make sense, everyone?
Yes, sir.
yes.
Perfect. So that's ecosystem for you in a nutshell. And if you understood all these pyramids, that's done. So the next important topic is, okay, one more thing which I skipped and I should talk about here is standing crop. So this is a one marker question which can come. What is a standing crop in ecosystem? So at every trophic level, for every species of organism, we discussed when we were doing the logistic growth model. Remember, what did I discuss? What did I say about the logistic growth model? People, do you remember logistic growth model and exponential growth model? Yes, no? Yes or no? So we discussed that there has to be a concept of carrying capacity, which is the maximum of a species biomass that can be sustained in that ecosystem. So this is what it says. Each trophic level has a certain mass of living material at a particular time, which it can sustain, and it is called a standing crop. So this is at every particular time. It cannot go. So whatever is the maximum, that's called the standing crop at that time. And the standing crop is measured as the mass of the living organism. Okay, will you remember that? Biomass. So basically biomass is a indirect way to assess the standing crop of that particular species in nature, in the ecosystem. Okay, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Cool.
Yep.
Okay, great. Now let's come to towards the end of the chapter. We are going to talk about, yeah, this is not very important. Another important part is succession. What do we mean by succession? Ecological succession. Write down this question. What do we mean by ecological succession? So succession simply means, if you have read this, you must have read this word more in history, where they say that King XYZ the second succeeded King XYZ the first, right? So that's a succession of throne. So here also, it's the succession of ecology. So in ecosystem, we see that there are sometimes ecosystem is not a constant thing. So we look at a forest and we say that, oh, this forest is going to be forever. It's not true. Everything is dynamic and everything changes. Such so is ecosystem. So sometimes, if you read here of all communities, their composition. So if you tweak with the composition and structure, okay, which constantly keep changes with response to the changing environmental conditions. Is that clear? So when the environmental condition changes, the composition and structure of every population in the ecosystem changes. For example, uh, the forests which are today, like rainforest, you see all these plants growing because it is a rainforest and it rains heavily. But due to climate change or due to change in the environmental conditions, if the rains become lesser and lesser over the time, what will happen? Will you see the same species of plants and animals surviving in a
No, sir.
rainforest? No. So rainforest always have very high abundance of amphibians because amphibians rely on both land and water. So you will not find amphibians diversity in a desert or in a grassland, but you will find amphibian diversity in a rainforest. But if rainforest or in a deciduous forest also, you will not find many amphibians. But if rainforests start losing their rain over time, so there is lesser and lesser rain, so there will be lesser and lesser amphibian species. So amphibian species will decline and maybe reptile or mammals will increase and they will take over. So this change, which is sequential, okay, and is parallel with the changes in the physical environment, leads to any community or any population which is at equilibrium. So one community reaches the equilibrium. So for example, currently all the rainforests have a high density of amphibians, okay, because there is environmental factors allow that to happen. So that will be called amphibian community will be called climax community, the community which reaches its equilibrium with the environment. And when the environment will change, you will see that there will be some other species coming up. So the gradual and fairly predictable change. So from here, so I'm marking it as it's in green. This is the definition. The gradual and fairly predictable change in the species composition of a given area is called ecological succession. It's just like, a democracy, how a democracy works. If you find that the votes change, so the factor that changes a democracy is people. If people think that, we should change the governing positions, then it changes. One party, one political party comes up and the other one goes down. Similarly, when environmental factor changes, so these changes are not very, very fast, because if they are very, very fast, they can lead to instability, destabilization of the environment. That is exactly what we are doing currently by fueling the global warming. We are not allowing species to adapt, because when it happens naturally, there is a ecological succession that happens. So obviously someone will go down, some species will go down and others will come up. So this has happened multiple times in Earth, in Earth's ecosystem. So if you see the fossil records, you will realize that mammals were not dominating the planet during the dinosaurs' time. That was the reptilian era. Okay, reptiles used to dominate the planet. Then reptiles downfall started and mammals started going up because of various reasons. One reason was that mammals could maintain their own body temperature. They are warm-blooded organisms. So when temperature became cold due to unavailability of sunlight, and there are theories that are being tested that why did dinosaurs got extinct all of a sudden? And how do we know that they got extinct all of a sudden? Again, it's not a story, because as you go back in fossil record, you will find that after one point in time, and the oldest fossil will be deepest in the earth. So as you go deep and deep, you will find lots of dinosaurs, reptiles. But after one point of time, you will see that now mammals, there are more mammals and mammals and mammals and less reptiles. So which means now there were no reptiles which were dying, which means they were not present. Okay. So it does not mean that they were not dying because they were living forever. They cannot live forever. So through the fossil studies, we can realize that how the Earth's ecosystem, which we never saw with our eyes, changed. Make sense, everyone?
Yes.
So that's called ecological succession. And then the definition of series, the sequence of the communities that successively change in a given area are called series. So one series come, for example, reptiles were one series, then came the mammals, they became the next series. So SERE is singular, SERES is plural. So these are the communities that came one after the other during this ecological succession change. Okay, and one example is given in plants here. If you look at this area, so there was no life here, let's say. So there can be two types of succession. Let me first talk about successions, which could be of two types. Now, I think NCERT does not elaborate on it. Yeah, but there can be two types of successions. One is called the primary succession and the other is called the secondary succession. So the primary succession is where there was no life to begin with. There was only abiotic factors, and then biotic factors started growing there. For example, a mountain which had no vegetation, and then vegetation begins. That's called primary succession. Or a area which was barren and then again started becoming a forest. So when a barren land will become convert into a forest, there will be some species that will come the first and start proliferating. Okay, they will be called the pioneer species. Do you understand? Is it clear? So primary succession means from the scratch. There was no life, and then now life started coming up. Is it clear, Fatima, Kulsum, and Matthew?
Yes, sir.
And secondary succession is where there was life, let's say a forest, and the forest got a wildfire, because of which the whole forest got burned down to ashes. So almost 95, 98% life got lost. But again, there will be a new forest that will grow, correct, from those ashes. So that is called a secondary succession. That is an example of a secondary succession. And the difference between primary and secondary succession is asked in your exams. So write down the question. What is the difference between a primary succession and a secondary succession? So the difference is that in the primary succession, in the beginning, the diversity will be very less. The diversity will be very less, and it will take a very long time to reach the climax again. Climax is the peak of diversity. Climax community we talked about. The primary succession is overall very slower as compared to secondary succession. Okay. And secondary succession is faster. The rate of succession is much faster, and there are reasons for it, because everything got burned down. But there will be a baseline foundation for life present there. For example, there will be soil, there will be organisms or detritivores which are already present inside the soil, which did not get affected by the fire. There will be water bodies which did not get affected by the fire. So some baseline which will not be present all the time in the case of primary succession will be there in the case of secondary succession. So that's why secondary succession is. So it's like if you are making something from the scratch, it will take more time, right? But if you already had something and that got destroyed or damaged, but you have to just but you have a foundation from where you can begin, right? It takes less time, right?
Yes, sir.
For a secondary succession, the climax is reached quickly, it is faster, and there is the reason is that the condition for life is present, the baseline is present. For example, presence of a soil, condition of the soil, availability of water, etc. Or also there can be seeds which did not got burned completely, and they are present as dormant seeds in the soil, and they will start propagating and growing, right? And the kind of pioneer species you will see in both will be different. Okay, and the definition for a pioneer species is here, that the species that invade a bare area, bare means which there was no life, called a pioneer species. And in the end, to give an example, write down succession in plants. Succession in plants. So in plants, ecologists study many kinds of successions, but two are given, which you have to understand. One is called hydrarch succession, and the other is called xerarch succession. Now, the hydrarch succession it comes from the word hydro or hydra, which means water. So where to begin with, the area was wet. It had water availability. Okay. Over time, that water will start evaporating and you lose water. So wet areas, when they start becoming drier, for example, formation of a grassland from a forest and then a desert from a grassland. These successions have happened on Earth. So they are called hydrarch successions. And in these, you will see that plants which are more tolerant to dry conditions will take up as pioneer species, and they will grow more and more and reach the climax faster. So the succession is from hydric conditions, which means water rich conditions. So this term hydric means water rich, to mesic conditions or a normal condition, not too dry, but medium. That is called hydrarch succession, from wet to medium. Xerarch succession, on the other hand, starts with dry regions, which to begin with were dry. For example, a desert, which we want to make back into a forest or a grassland. So dry areas where there was no water, already the species that were living there were xeric. So the word xerarch or xeric comes from dry. To mesic. Mesic means medium. So again, in both cases, succession is coming towards the medium conditions, from too wet to medium and too dry to medium. Okay. So, but there are also cases where from a forest or desert forms, right? So first it has to go through a hydrarch succession, which means hydric to mesic, and then it has to go into a reverse xerarch, mesic to xeric. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So both hydrarch and xerarch conditions lead to medium water conditions, neither too wet nor too dry. So this point you should remember if you want to quote an example. If they ask about successions in, give one example of succession. Okay. Is succession clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So more or less, these were the most important parts of this chapter that you should know and remember. Now for nutrient cycling, let's do you read this. It is just how, so they have taken into, I think this part is excluded from your syllabus, but there are three things that you should know: carbon, phosphorus, and nitrogen. Nitrogen is not here. Nitrogen cycling you have studied already. Uh, but carbon and phosphorus. So just read it for entrances. And if you find any doubt in these, we will discuss it in the next class. But in the next class, I will majorly take your doubts from this chapter, and I will start with the last chapter. So the last chapter of your book is deleted from a syllabus. So the last chapter of the syllabus is 15, where we talk about biodiversity and its conservation. So that we will start in the next class, and I will connect ecosystem